Basic Brewing Radio is brought to you in part by our friends and sponsors Ricky and Kelly at Groenfell and Havoc Meaderies and their new Bottle of the Month Club. That's right. If you go to groenfell.com, you can subscribe to get an exclusive mead just for members each month. This month, if you subscribe before September 25th, you'll get a mead made with sumac, orange leaves, and grape leaves. That sounds really fun and delicious. I'm going to talk to Santa about this and maybe start Christmas early this year. Find out all the details about the Bottle of the Month Club at family-owned and operated Groenfell.com. That's Groennfell. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, September 14th, 2023. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Steve Wilkes and I head to Fayetteville Beer Works, a brewery with no hot side equipment on site, to talk to founder Brian O'Connell, who is using his experience as co-founder of Renegade Brewing in Denver to carve out a unique niche in Northwest Arkansas. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing, and many thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. Financial supporters this week will see an early release of Steve's attempt to brew hot dog beer. Instead of putting all the various ingredients of a Chicago hot dog in the fermenter, Steve made a tincture. How did it turn out? Well, tune in to see. Financial supporters will also get a behind-the-scenes video of Steve brewing the beer on my patio and trying Malort, a controversial Chicago favorite. How many faces will Steve make after tasting the Malort? Well, tune in to see if you're a financial subscriber. Looking into the mailbag, which don't cost you nothing, a listener, Steve from Miami, sent a note after hearing Adam Ross of Twin Span Brewing and I play the first episode of our first edition of Mash Your Luck. Steve wanted to tell us about a somewhat similar competition that the Miami Area Society of Homebrewers have taken part in. It's called Trash Draft. It's kind of like a fantasy sports-like draft competition where brewers draft malts, hops, yeast, and a mystery ingredient. The results will be judged during their winter solstice party in December. That also sounds like a lot of fun. I'd love to hear how that turns out. I appreciate the note, Steve. Listener Johan in South Africa wrote in with a question. Johan says, I've listened to your podcast of January 12th, 2006. Oh, my goodness. About your six-pack of IPA, where you discussed flying home with beer from Denver. It got me thinking I will fly soon, and I want to take some yeast along for a friend. Will the X-ray scanners at the airport damage the yeast? Well, we've had beer brewed with yeast that's been to space, but maybe not through the X-ray scanners. Well, I forwarded the question to Eben at Imperial Yeast, and Eben says there shouldn't be any loss of viability if Johan stores it properly. In other words, keeps it cool or cold. Eben also forwarded a link to a research paper titled Evaluation of the Effects of Radiation from an X-ray Baggage Inspection System on Microbial Agents. Now, that's pretty specific. In that paper, a total of 11 microorganisms, including bacteria, bacterial spores, yeast, and viruses, were screened with a baggage X-ray system, and apparently there was no evidence of loss of viability. So there you go. Thanks to Johan for the question, and Eben and everybody at Imperial for the help in answering it. Viability. I brewed a batch of hop samplers yesterday. It's been way too long since Steve and I have tasted a hop sampler in the show. This time, I'm putting Nectaron against Idaho 7 and Vic Secret. I really like that honey IPA that I brewed with Nectaron, so I'm really looking forward to tasting that especially. If you haven't listened to the Hop Sampler series, it's been a while, like I say, since we've done one. I brew 3 6-pack extract batches, and to do that, I just bring up an extract wort just to the boil, and then steep the hops for a 10-minute hop stand before chilling and pitching. The amount of hops is weighted between varieties, based on alpha acid percentage, proportionally. So theoretically, the IBUs should be pretty close. Usually they are. Hoping to try those before October. Speaking of October, Susan and I are going on vacation in early October, and I'm hoping to only miss posting just 1 week of the show, but it's been so long since we've had a real vacation, I might have to miss 2. We'll see. I used to take the whole month of June off before the pandemic happened, so we'll just have to see. A fair warning, everybody. I'm expecting a shipment from our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave of HighGravityBrew.com. Even as we speak here, it's the ingredients for the beer that Chris Colby and I formulated for next week's show. No spoilers on the style. I also got to the ingredients for the hop samplers that I mentioned earlier a few days ago through HighGravityBrew.com. It's so easy to both create bundles for beer batches in the Build Your Own Beer page so that you get, certain ingredients milled together if you want to, and I do. But it's also easy to order individual items and ingredients on the rest of the site. For instance, I also picked up some priming sugar and some beer line cleaner along with the extracts that I bought for those hop samplers. I'm spoiled, I tell you, and the shipping options on HighGravityBrew.com are great, too. And while you're there, be sure to check out all the electric brewing options to take the pain out of propane, along with High Gravity's own Warthog electric controllers and systems, which you can upgrade, by the way, to Spike and Blickman vessels. You can find Brewzilla gear as well, if you like the more all-in-one approach. Use the code EBC75BB to save $75 off your Warthog purchase. Brewing season is here. Get geared up and stock up with our longtime friends at HighGravityBrew.com. Send them some love and show them that you appreciate their support of this show at HighGravityBrew.com. Okay, despite all the news about craft beer peaking and worrying about a slump in the industry, it's still going strong here in Northwest Arkansas. In fact, a handful of new breweries are coming on the scene, including Fayetteville Beer Works. Now, I've never heard of a brewery operating in the way this one does. They get all their wort from another brewery in town, ferment it at their new tap room, and serve it directly from the bright tanks. Steve and I talked to founder Brian O'Connell to see how it all came together. Brian O'Connell, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thank you for having me.
Where are we at?
We are in the tap room at Fayetteville Beer Works.
Fayetteville Beer Works in the eastern part of town?
Yeah, we are at the corner of Mission and Crossover, essentially. So we are on the west side of Crossover, south side of Mission, right behind Wendy's.
Not far from where my wife Susan and I used to live, over in that general direction. Sitting across the table is Steve Wilkes.
Hey, James. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really like this tap room a lot.
Yeah, this is we've got so much to talk about. First of all, I want to give credit to Brian Sorensen, our good friend and beer writer, who I've got crib notes here because I read his article in the Fayetteville Flyer. So it seems like we're always following Brian wherever he goes. We'll let him do the research, and then we come and act like we know what we're talking about. So, Brian, before we get into Fayetteville Beer Works, let's get into a bit of your history. You're not new to beer, and in fact, you've got quite an extensive history with it, starting in Denver, right?
That's right. Yeah, I am the founder of Renegade Brewing Company, which was started in 2011 in the Santa Fe Arts District of Denver, so pretty much downtown Denver area. and grew that to a larger distribution brewery. We had a separate restaurant associated with it, and then, of course, our original tap room, and I sold that.
Congratulations. So you have a sort of a good vantage point to view not only where the industry has been, but where it is now, and I guess where it's going. So what are your impressions of, what was it like to go through that boom cycle at Renegade?
It was a lot of fun at first. I'm count myself very fortunate that I got to live through one of the golden periods of craft. And there's been a few of them, and then they're followed by bust periods. And I was fortunate enough to sell Renegade before going through COVID, and that was a really difficult time for the industry. And I'm thankful that I didn't have to do that. But it was a really fun, wild ride. We opened 2011, and really up until 2015, it was a period of a lot of growth and a lot of excitement and a lot of changes in the industry. 2016, 17, 18, and ultimately 19 when I sold it and left. Those were periods where the industry was changing a lot. You really had to be very focused on your business acumen, your quality. It wasn't just easy money anymore. It was a lot of competition. The distribution side of things changed quite a bit. There was a lot of consolidation in distributors, and shelf space became a lot tighter. Seltzer came on the market and took quite a bit of share from craft beer. You saw a lot of craft brewers jumping into seltzer to try and make up for some of that. So it was a lot of changes, and it became much more challenging. Some of those challenges were good, and they were fun to work through and kind of work out. Some of them were really, really difficult, and craft, like any industry, has grown and changed and matured, and is I think now finding a period of stabilization. We're not going through rapid growth anymore, which is good. Some people will say, well, is craft dying? It only grew 5%. Well, 5% is good. 20% growth is not good because it's not sustainable. And so I think now we're in a much better place with craft. It's in a more stable place, and I think there's still plenty of room for new breweries to come in as long as they think smart about their business plan, their market plan, and how they're going to make their place in the industry. If you come in and just try to copy, or you come into a really crowded market, you're going to have a difficult time. But there's still spots out here in East Fayetteville. I found one. There's nobody out here, so we're happy to be here and be a neighborhood pub.
Yeah, obviously you can't be too pessimistic about the industry because you just opened a new brewery. You'd be kind of silly to to think that it was all over and then get into it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Craft has demonstrated long enough that it's here to stay. There's demand for it. Even in the bust times, there's demand for it. The consumers are always there. It's just that the business models of craft sometimes aren't adapted well to the changes that are occurring in the industry. And this go around, I've made a conscious choice to take a smaller neighborhood approach to it. I have no plans of ever distributing. There's great Arkansas beers that are out there on the shelf. I don't necessarily feel like I can go out there and add more to that, but I do feel like I can add a great neighborhood pub and a great retail experience for the customers that come in here, and offer them a really unique experience and really fresh beer in the way that we're serving it.
Yeah, I've said for a long time that it seemed to me the brewery industry sort of mirrors the restaurant industry in that you've got your national chains, you've got your regional chains, you've got your state chain, and then you've got your, all the way down to the mom and pop corner restaurants and the food trucks. And you can find success at any level, any of those levels, if you do your business planning right, and you find your customer base and you find your niche, right? I mean, you've gone from, as I understand, I remember from the article, distributing in 5 states with Renegade, right, and fighting for shelf space with maybe some of your friends sometimes, to now you've literally carved out your local niche here in this part of town, and you're taking an approach that is hyper local, and you're taking aside from the business, you're taking a brewing approach that I've never heard about before. You don't have a hot side here in the house, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So we actually did this at Renegade for a period of time, really? Because we had 2 breweries, and we outgrew our first brewery, and we were expanding to our second brewery, and that initial expansion was just fermenters and bright tanks and a packaging line. And we had ordered a brew house. We were waiting for it to arrive. We went through a lot of delays with that, not only delays with the brew house being fabricated and installed, but delays from the city of Denver and getting it put into our new development. And so we ended up, it was meant to be shorter term than it was. It ended up, we ended up doing that for probably about a period of about a year, where we brewed at our original facility, and then we trucked our wort over to our new facility. We fermented there, we moved to bright tanks, and then we packaged out of there. And as I was thinking about this, putting this new concept together, I wanted to bring the brewery forward as much as possible to the customer. I wanted them, not just brewery tours, but I wanted them to feel like they were sitting in a brewery having a beer. And with that, but I didn't want to include, the things that are noisy and, create mess and that sort of thing. And a brew house it's just not utilized all that often, especially at this size. We only need to brew 2 to 3 times a month. And so, most of the work is on the cellar side, and we have the cellar here. And so when I was thinking about this, I called up Ben at Fossil Cove, and I told him my idea, and I said, would you be interested? And, that way we could utilize your brew house that's already sitting there, make it a little bit more active. And it works out for both of us. I, basically rent it off of you, and, that way I don't have to invest in one, and he gets more activity out of his brew house. And so far it's been a win-win for us.
That's amazing. So it's almost like you're a nomadic brewer, but you have your own place. So you actually do have a physical location. So if it works right, and I assume it's working right, you both see advantages because he's losing or he's selling off excess capacity essentially, and you're getting the product where you can sell it here.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a brewer here, and we send our brewer over to Fossil Cove for the hot side brewing of it. Their staff has been involved some as well. So it's been a great, collaboration between our 2 teams. And then we just bring the wort over here, and we finish it. We do all of our own fermentation over here, and then we move to bright tanks. And then we serve directly off of those bright tanks, so we don't package.
That's amazing. It's just, I've never heard of that before. So, Steve, you're sipping on a Pilsner. What do you think?
It's very nice beer. It's a really good example of the style. This one, I think, is a little maltier, say, compared to a Bitburger, something like that, which is a little drier and crisper. This one has a little lusciousness to it. I really like that. So it's a little softer. I don't know what hops you use, but they're appropriate to the style, not over hopped, which can be a problem in American breweries brewing traditional German beers. Sometimes they get a little too American with it. So, but this is a really good example of the style. It's a very pleasant beer.
Tell us about that beer.
Yeah, so it is a very classic example of a Pilsner. It was in our head brewer, Peter Etches, comes from Urban Chestnut Brewing, which has a strong German background to it. So he's very good at brewing true to style. I think you'll see that in the Kolsch as well. Another great example of a German beer. One of the nice things about our model is that we, because we're not packaging, we're not particularly concerned about having essentially like a house yeast. We're using different strains of yeast on every single beer, so we're using the yeast that is true to that style. We are not in a rush to get our beers out. We're not on a distribution schedule, which was something that we faced constantly at Renegade. And so, sometimes you're like, boy, I'd love if that beer had 3 more days, but the truck's coming, so let's get it in a can, right? So I think, some of those things just allow for us to, really bring the beer as true to style as we can. That's what we're trying to do here, is have beers that are not only true to style, but that are approachable. We really want, like I said, we want this to be a neighborhood pub. So we want people to come in and we keep the ABVs lower on everything. We want people to come in and have 2 or 3 beers and hang out for a bit and play a game and get to know their neighbor. We'll do we've got an experimental beer back there that hasn't come out yet. We'll have those, but mostly we're trying to do true to style and sessionable beers.
So I didn't see the creamsicle Oreo chocolate stout on.
Yeah.
It's waiting for the habaneros to come in. Yeah. And then they'll dry habanero it.
So yeah, the classic style. We have a hazy IPA, we have a Kolsch, we have a brown ale, a West Coast IPA, a tangerine double IPA, which sounds fun, a wit, and a Pilsner. So nothing too crazy here.
Nothing too crazy. As crazy as we are right now is that tangerine double IPA. Like I said, we do have an experimental beer back there that's coming out that's going to hit about close to 14% alcohol. And it's going to have some fruit on it, and it's going to be a fun one. But we also have approachable sessionable beers in the works as well. So that's mostly what we're going to be doing. Our goal here is really, if we can get somebody in who's a Bud drinker or a Coors drinker, and we can get them to enjoy one of our beers, we feel like that's a real big win for us, and it's a big win for the craft industry in general. And so we're really focused on making sure our beers are super high quality, and hopefully introducing new people to craft beer. And of course, we love to have the beer geeks and the hard the hardcore craft drinkers, and hopefully we're pleasing them too. But it's great to bring new folks into the fold and introduce them to craft.
Well, I've got the Kolsch, and it's delicious. It's nice and clean. It's super clean. It's very malty, and but there's a nice bitterness edge there to counteract that. I get a little teeny bit of sweetness maybe from the yeast character, which is maybe is that appropriate for the style, since it's Kolsch is kind of like a straddling of the ales and the pilsners, right?
Yeah, Kolsch is technically an ale, and it's more bready, I would say, than sweet. It does have a good, malty backbone to it. It's not going to be a bitter beer. It's lower IBUs. It's probably close to 20 IBUs on that one. So, really just enough bitterness to balance out the malt sweetness on it. Bitter shouldn't be a characteristic of it. Whereas that Pilsner is running more about like 30 to 35 IBUs. So again, bitterness isn't going to be a characteristic of it, but the hops are going to stand up to the malt character a little bit more in that one and give you a little bit more perceived dryness, whereas that one you might have a little bit more perceived sweetness.
Yeah, it's real good. I could drink pint after pint of that. The ingredients for the beer that Chris Colby and I formulated for the show you'll hear next week are on the way, and so is the seasonal yeast that I'll use from Imperial Yeast. L26 Pilgrimage is shipping this week. Pilgrimage produces a clean fermentation and accentuates malt profile to create balanced and nuanced lagers, which will be perfect for next week's beer. No spoilers. I'm going to be brewing a 2-gallon batch of that beer, so I'm not going to make a starter for it. Normally, because of the 200 billion cells in each easy-to-open package, I don't make starters for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches. In fact, my stir plate is dusty. For lagers, I generally do, though, although really technically I might not need to. Anyway, since this next beer is a small batch, I'm skipping the starter and just pitching the pack of Pilgrimage. Normally I'm not a lager guy, but working with Imperial has taken the fear out of the process for me. I used to be worried about lagers stalling in cooler fermentations, but not anymore. Imperial Yeast is something else. Ask your local homebrew store about L26 Pilgrimage from Imperial Yeast and check out all the dependable deliciousness at imperialyeast.com. It's imperialyeast.com. Talk about the logistics. I mean, you're brewing your beer across town, or your wort across town. How do you get it over here? It's not a short drive, and there are a bunch of hills between here and there.
Yeah. So, somebody asked me the other day how much it costs to run the pipeline over here.
I was going to ask, how many 5-gallon buckets did you need?
Well, we don't use either of those methods. So it's very common in the wine and the cider industry, the distilling industry, to bring in raw liquid material in IBC totes. And so that's what we do. We use an IBC tote. They're those big square plastic totes with the metal cage around them. We have ours somewhat retrofitted so that it can meet our purpose. We have brewer's hardware put on it, TC fittings, spray ball. We need to be able to hook up with CO2 to backfill CO2 as we draw the wort off so we don't expose it to air. So we have some... We put some fittings on them to make them work for that purpose, but that's how we do it. And we have those strapped to a trailer, and we pull that with the truck and bring it over here. We run a long hose out from the trailer into here, and we just use standard brewing equipment, brewer's hose, pump it into the tank. It's no different than the process you would use to knock out into a fermenter. We essentially are just doing 2 knockouts. We're knocking out into a tote, and then from a tote into a fermenter.
And at that stage in the production, you don't have to worry about oxidation because you want to introduce oxygen into that process. That's
correct, yeah. Don't have to worry about oxygen. You don't have to worry about light exposure yet because the yeast hasn't been pitched yet. So, really the only thing that we're concerned about at that point is we don't want to expose it to any microbes because that could cause spoilage. So that tote is fully sanitized and sealed before the wort goes into it. Once the wort goes into it, then it stays sealed. And like I said, we backfill it with CO2 as we're drawing wort off of it for displacement instead of leaving it open to the air because that could introduce microbes to it.
So what kind of volume are we talking about moving, or what's your fermentation space, and what kind of volume are those containers that you're driving across town?
Yeah, so our fermenters are 10-barrel fermenters, which means we typically push about 11 barrels of wort into it. Account for some loss in the fermenter with yeast trub and hop trub. So we're bringing roughly 11 barrels over from
Fossil Cove.
Fossil Cove. Sorry, my advanced age just got
Tell me about
it. There.
Tell me about it.
But yeah, about 11 barrels we bring over in one of those totes and pump that into the fermenter.
Wow, you've never heard about anything like this either, right?
Not in the beer industry, but in the wine industry, it is actually quite common. To develop the must and then move the must from one place where it must go to another place.
And up at Black Apple Crossing, they've got apple juice. They're a cidery, so they've got. I've seen in their basement. This has been years since I've been there, but in their basement were the giant totes full of apple juice. And so,
yeah, absolutely. And in the distilling industry, a lot of distillers are buying, neutral grain spirit, and they're turning that into gin, or they're buying, a whiskey product and they're aging it in their own barrels or giving it some additive or whatever, and they're bringing that in as a raw liquid material, and then making their own alteration to it and turning it into their product. So yeah, literally every other alcohol beverage industry is doing this. It's just not very common in beer yet, and I don't know, maybe we'll make it more common.
Well, I wonder if that's just because beer comes to maturity so much quicker. So if you're making a Pinot Noir wine, you got a couple of years you're looking at, so there's kind of no hurry. But with beer, it's like next week.
Yeah, I think it's, brewers are, they're concerned about, I think the biggest concern is about the introduction of microbes, but, I think we're showing, that it can be done. We haven't had any issues. Like I said, we did this at Renegade for over a year. We never had microbes introduced into one of those batches. We haven't had any issue here either, so I think, I hope other brewers start to do it. I think it's a good way for brewers to collaborate and take advantage of capacity that's out there, and it's nobody gets rich in the craft beer industry, so it's as much efficiency as we can find together and work together, I think is great.
You have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious about some logistical things. How do you manage? So you're building the wort at Fossil Cove. Do you have your own grain there? Or are you utilizing their ingredients and then adapting your recipes to their ingredients, or do you have your own kind of corner of the brew house with your stuff in it?
Yeah, everything's 100% separate. So we order in our own ingredients. We keep them separate from them. We have our own bags of hops. We have our own bags of grain. Ben was nice enough to give us a little storage area that's ours. And then, of course, we keep some hops over here on site for dry hopping. We have some fruit on site and things like that for additions into the bright tanks. But yeah, we do store a lot of stuff over there.
Would it be possible to get another sample?
Yeah, let's do
like some. What would you like, Steve?
I think I want to try the Tangerine Double IPA.
Doggone it. Well, actually, I'd like to try the West Coast IPA, please, if you don't mind, sir. We will pause, and we will be right back. What do you think, Steve? First of all, what do you think about this whole concept? Isn't it fun?
Yeah, I mean, for at my advanced age, it sounds like a lot of work, but it's nice to come into a brewery that doesn't smell like a factory. You kind of get, for the customer, for the client, you have kind of the best experience of the brewery without the industrialness of it in some ways. Although it's clearly industrial architecture and the way that the room is put together, but just the idea that, I don't know, you're kind of just getting the frosting. You don't have to have all the cake underneath.
And you don't have to deal with a bunch of heat.
Yeah, absolutely. Breweries are hot. We had at Renegade, of course, we had our small brew house. We had our 25,000 square foot production facility, and in the height of the summer, and you got that kettle cranking, and your air conditioning just doesn't keep up. It gets hot, and it produces a lot of steam, and it can get hot and sticky in there. So it is nice that we don't produce any heat here. It's all cold side.
And again, you're serving right off the bright tanks. I mean, you're not even kegging at this point.
Correct. I don't own any kegs. Don't have any cans or bottles. We don't package at all. So Peter and I developed this draft system. The two of us sitting around drawing out sketches, just trying to think about all the variables that go into a draft system and how we could make this as controllable as possible, because obviously we're coming off of a big tank with a lot of volume in it and a pretty short draw. And so we did everything we could to think of, safety measures and beer control, and we're using European faucets. Those allow for a lot more flow control. They have a flow control on two measures of flow control on them. So between those two adjustments, we really can heavily control the rate of flow of the beer, which is good. When you have a short draw and a lot of volume behind it. And it was one of those things that was kind of a leap of faith. We didn't know exactly how it's going to work until we had a tank full of beer, and at that point, it's kind of too late. So I was very relieved to pour that first beer off of there and see it pour beautifully. And we've just been having a lot of success with this system, and it looks really cool. It's a great showpiece, and it is, the great thing about it is the freshest beer possible. This is the way a brewer tastes beer. This is the point a brewer tastes it and says, "Yep, that's ready. Let's go to package." So I think it's a really fun experience for a customer to be able to come in to a brewery and taste what a brewer is tasting.
And you don't have to worry about balancing tap lines. You don't have to worry about sanitizing long lines of plastic tubing. There are probably a lot of advantages that you have over, places who have, you don't have to carry kegs from one place to another. You don't have to sanitize kegs. You don't have to clean kegs. There's probably a laundry list of things that are advantages. Is there anything that you've found that's not an advantage at this point?
Not yet. I mean, the only thing, that's, I would say that's a little bit of a disadvantage is if you have your beer in kegs, and we would do this sometimes at Renegade. We might serve half a batch of a beer, especially if it's like a stout or something like that. We were well known for our Russian Imperial Stout at Renegade. And a lot of times we would serve that beer. We might serve half of it. We might pull the other half and then just bring a keg out here and there. I might hold kegs back in the cellar for 2-3 years and age them and bring them out. I can't do that here. I got to fully serve through a whole batch of beer, empty that tank, clean it, and get the whole next batch in there. So you are limited in kind of playing around with what's on tap, because it's not as easy as just, let's go switch out a keg. You're committed. You got 10 barrels of beer sitting there, and you're gonna have that until it's gone.
But that means it's probably going to be fresher.
Right. Yeah. It is. That's the idea behind it, is that the beer's fresh. We serve it as fresh as possible. We run through the whole thing, and then we bring in something new. And it's just a different model than what I did before. And for me, this is fun. Peter and I have both been around the beer industry for quite a while, and I think this, we were both aligned on this, that we kind of want to have some fun and the creativity that just having a small brewery without the demands of packaging and the fact that we can just let's surf through a beer and then just let's put another one on. We don't have to make that one again. Let's think of something new. And
it's almost like home brewing in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the possibilities are only as limitless as what we can come up with, and we have a lot of ideas. So.
Well, this West Coast IPA is really nice. The aroma hits you as soon as you put the glass up to your nose. It's got a nice base bitterness without being too, sort of challenging, and I assume that's by design.
Absolutely, yeah. That one is 100% Peter. I got to give him all the credit on that, and he just nailed it. It is a super classic example of the West Coast style with real big aroma on it, nice bitterness to it, but not overwhelming bitterness. When you think of classic West Coast styles, Stone and Green Flash, and some of those original San Diego breweries that invented this style, I think he did a really good job of just nailing that. And but it's not out of a bottle that was packaged in San Diego 6 months ago. It's super fresh, so it's just it's a great beer.
Yeah, one sentence that has never been said would be try this IPA. I've been saving it for 6 months. It's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sure the sentence has been said, but
whether it was true or not. Well, Susan had some, and she didn't make a face. So, what do you think of the what was it? The Tangerine Double IPA?
About the same thing that you said for the West Coast, just in that it's clearly an IPA, but it doesn't overwhelm me. It's not as doesn't have that big bitter knockout thing. The beer I always think about is Avery's IPA, which is a great IPA, but about 3 of those and my palate was shot, and because of the hopping strategy. I'm not comparing this beer to that, but it's not, other than it just doesn't overwhelm. The hopping strategy doesn't overwhelm my palate, and I get a nice little citrus note out of it. It's a nice beer, and again, it's kind of a session double IPA, as double IPAs go. So at slightly under 8%, it's not killing you, or I shouldn't say it's not causing you to go out and kill yourself after 3 of them.
But it's not sticky.
No, not at all. It's not gloppy. It's not sticky. It's not syrupy. Just a nice, clean, but clearly a heavier example of the style.
So I haven't tasted it, but generally, or at least in some West Coast, double IPAs, there's sugar involved. Is there sugar in this beer?
No, not at all.
Oh.
The only thing that goes into our beer is malt, water, yeast, and hops, and with the exception of if we clearly add an adjunct to it. Like tangerine, but in those cases we're using like purees, fruit purees, and we have another beer coming out that will have peach in it, and that's a fruit puree that's a hard
I know
to say right there.
I brewed several fruit puree beers in a row, and it is challenging.
But yeah, that we're trying to. It's funny, it's 7.8%, sessionable double IPA. And yes, double IPAs have gone up to, 9, 10, 11.
Yeah, huge beers.
Huge beers. And rewind the clock, 15 years, that was the range of double IPA. It was in that 7 to 8%. And that's, again, even though it's our bigger beer, we're trying to do beers that are sessionable and more approachable.
And again, you're a neighborhood pub.
Yes.
And so you're not making beers that people will be taking home with them and enjoying at their own house. So there's a level of responsibility there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We get a lot of families in here Saturday afternoon. I don't know if you noticed, we've got our little kids corner over there with toys and games and stuff. And and it is a chance for it's a chance for mom and dad to come in and sit down and have a beer and let the kids go over in the corner and play a game, and they can sit with each other and talk after the busy week, and but they're in here with their kids. They're not in here to party and get drunk. They're in here to have a good quality beer and a sessionable beer, and I think we do a good job of providing that.
And you've got some snacky foods.
We do. Absolutely, yeah. We've got hot pretzels and popcorn and hot dogs and chips and salsa and things like that are just good little snacks to have with your beer. They're good for the kids. We've got an ice cream freezer for the kids, and we've got some chips and candy and things like that. So we try to make this as fun for the kids as we can. Obviously we can't give them a beer, but we try to make it a place that they want to come as well as mom and dad want to come. So,
any future plans on the food aspect, and like either making your own, more substantial food offerings, or bringing in someone else to help you with that?
Yeah, I think we'll probably bring in some food trucks from time to time. Our food offerings are probably, they might change from what they are today, but as far as the level of complication, we're probably about as complicated as we're going to get. I've owned a restaurant before, and I don't intend to do that again. So we're not going to go down the road of being a restaurant, but having a few hot snacks is good and easy for us to manage.
Yeah, I understand the restaurant failure rate is maybe higher than breweries. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not even the failure rate. It's just anybody who runs a restaurant will tell you it's hard work, and it's gotten harder. The food prices have come up a lot, and it's it's just, you got to really watch your margins and watch your food waste, and you have to be diligent on it, because food is highly perishable. For us in the beer industry, if we have a slow night, it's okay. Beer's still going to be good tomorrow. But in a restaurant, if you heat up a bunch of food and nobody shows up, it's going in the trash. Yeah. So, yeah.
So I know you're just getting started, but future plans, I mean, have you pretty much just reached where you want to be? I mean, it seems like you've got your goal already. As far some breweries, they start up and they say, yeah, we eventually want to start canning, we want to start distribution, we want to start. It seems like you're already kind of there.
I'm there. I'm happy. My favorite thing at Renegade was always, eventually we were in a separate location, so our production was down the street from where our tap room was, and I had an office down there, and my favorite thing was I'd always cut out early on Fridays, and I'd go down to the tap room and have a couple of beers. And that was always my favorite, just sitting there watching people have fun drinking my beer. You get disconnected from that when you're distributing, because, the beer gets wrapped up on a pallet and it gets on a truck and goes out the door and you never see it again. And there's aspects of that are really fun. And I traveled around to a lot of different states and went to a lot of different bars and did events, and I mean, I couldn't even tell you how many liquor stores and bars I've been in at this point.
Me neither.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different story.
And that's before you got involved in this thing.
That's right.
But, it's fun. You meet a lot of people, and that part of it can be fun. But for me, that was never as fun as just having a group of people in the tap room having a really fun time. And it was hard, as Renegade grew, I didn't have much time to focus on the tap room, and it sustained itself. It just kind of ran, but now this, I get to really think about it and really, shape it as it goes along, and continue to tweak that customer experience and make it as fun as I possibly can, and hopefully give Peter just lots of runway to make fun and interesting beers. And I think just having my focus on this, it can be really fun and cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, you said fun a lot, and I think you're right on. I think this is going to be a fun place to hang out, and I've certainly had fun here today with you guys, and I appreciate your carving out a little bit of time and talking to us. Best wishes for a successful run.
Well, thanks very much. I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate the listeners who listen to this, and hopefully they will all come down and have a beer.
There you go. And thanks, Steve.
You're welcome, James.
Well, thanks again to Brian and Steve. What a fun place and an innovative concept. I'll post a couple of pics on social media. Gotta love fresh local beer. And I swear I haven't had any this morning. Just 2 cups of coffee. That's my problem. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Till then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.